trying to explain what is within what is not, which is to say, trying to explain or describe truth with terms and concepts provided by illusion, is doomed from the start to be particularly fruitless. All there is seeing, understanding, in what is, in thoughtless, wordless stillness. It is simply impossible to communicate. Why bother trying? Good question. All I can say is, like the understanding itself, like life itself, the attempts at communication come unsought, unasked for, unwilled, and there is no trying nor any doing. What follows is a conglomeration of odd bits of scribbled verse, journal entries, emails, letters, answers to questions, conversations constructed loosely from memory, and sometimes just sitting down at the computer and typing. Most of it's quite raw and unpolished, and all of it is simply consciousness streaming through a mind-body apparatus completely empty of any individual self, by which there is no special claim being made. The same is true of consciousness, streaming through the mind-body you think of as yourself. You probably think you are reading this. I assure you, you are not. Reading is happening, but there is in no sense a you doing it, and the you think you are most certainly does not exist. Welcome to all that is. I am fully aware that what follows may in places be quite difficult to read and make sense of. The word processor's spelling and grammar checking functions choked on this document. Basic rules of language, grammar, capitalization, punctuation, syntax, all have been stretched and mutilated in this attempt to get words to point away from their common usage and toward the decidedly uncommon. Not much can be done about this. There is no intention to be obtuse. Words are used in odd ways for a reason, because that's as near as can be said. At this point, the text has been proofread and spell-checked many times by many readers. If there are odd spellings, punctuations, or usages, these are most likely used intentionally to convey a meaning, and the meaning would be perhaps subtly different if it were done correctly. Often the text does not follow smoothly. It is frequently chopped up with unconventional words and phrasing when more familiar language would read more fluidly. This is unavoidable. You may find occasions where the language seems to contradict itself or what was said earlier. Given the limitations of language, this too is necessary. Many of the themes are revisited, and so some of it may seem to be repetitive. See the repetition as an invitation to go deeper, to look through and beyond. Remember, these words are being used to point beyond themselves, and what is understood the first time they are read is rarely the deepest or the fullest understanding. And please remember, none of the images or ideas or concepts presented here are themselves true, or even directly indicate the truth. All are only vectors pointing somewhere toward the general direction. The reason nothing expressed here can be the truth is that concepts, thought, and language are all inherently dualistic, and what they are trying to express is not. In duality, for every object there is a subject. For every better, there is a worse. For each truth, a falsehood. As much clarity as confusion. Both love and hate, stillness and motion, perfect and imperfect, complete and incomplete. That is why the masters were and are so fond of remarking, neti neti, neither this nor that, neither one side nor the other. In duality, and therefore in language, there's always the flip side, the opposite that completes or complements and which is equally untrue. Inherently dualistic language is used here in a peculiar way to point to what transcends duality. Love, which is beyond love and hate. Stillness that is not the opposite of movement. Perfection, which has nothing to do with perfect versus imperfect. Traditionally, the teaching about this has been referred to as a set of pointers rather than a set of truths. For this very reason, and also for this reason, there is a preference for pointers which indicate what all that is not, rather than pointers which attempt to define what it is. Neti neti. All these things and everything written in the pages that follow are just concepts, thought bubbles, created in this mind-generated illusion, and as such are severely limited and inherently flawed. In fact, quite frankly, it's all crap. Eventually all ideas, all experiences, all words, all books, all teachings are beside the point. Eventually, all there is complete letting go and going beyond. Going, completed, beyond. Then everything will cease. Everything will have never been. And there is only understanding, and the peace that passes all understanding. When you learn that there is nothing you can do to accomplish this or bring it about, there will be a moment of frustration. But this, like everything, thought or experience, will only be temporary. Fortunately, it has never been up to you anyway. Part 2. Abruptly, instantly, effortlessly, out of stillness. A dream a-stirring, waking to the real. The Jungle, Part 1. Open your hidden eye and come. Return to the root of your own self. Rumi. Final disclaimer, a necessary one. Before we get on with the story already, the task here is to tell the story of what happened in the jungle. There is no reason to do this, no point to the story. The understanding itself cannot be talked about, can only be pointed to. And that is all that can be done now, is what everything that happens through this mind-body thing is. Talking about the experiential events in the dream that led up to it and surrounded the pop of perception, the realization, the waking out of the dream is meaningless. It is just more dream story. There are those who have asked for this story to be told, perhaps to be able to evaluate it for themselves. Fair enough. Here are the circumstances surrounding that event. Ultimately, it is only the understanding itself which is of value, not the story of the mind-body thing. But the story is asked for, so here it is. This is what happened in this mind-body. So what? Who cares? When Ramesh Balsekar's book Who Cares was published, I found that in typing the title, these fingers, creatures of habit, would inevitably misspell it by inverting 2 letters and typing Who CARSE. It brings a smile every time, a little gift in consciousness. The title of Ramesh's book is not meant dismissively or rhetorically, but rather in the tradition of Ramana Maharshi's Who am I? As a question to be investigated. Who is it that cares? So too this. Who is this CARSE? Who indeed? No one at all. And what does it matter? The accepted social norm is to emphasize the individual character, the individual effort, the individual experience, the individual story. In fact, nothing could be further from having any significance. So please, do not make the mistake of reading this to find out something about this so-called life, some pattern or path or some chain of causation. The perfect unfolding, the infinite expression in consciousness is indeed perfect, is indeed infinite. There is no path, except in hindsight, and then there are infinite paths. If you read this story and add it to your collection of stories of pathways to enlightenment, and study the similarities and chart the differences, the story will be of no help, and may actually be a massive hindrance. Like any practice, any work, any trying, any thinking, any book, the only possible help it can be is if you spend your whole life doing it and finally realize it is of no value and doesn't get you anywhere. Forget it. The Tao that can be spoken is not the Tao. The story that can be told is just more noise. Be still. Who is the I that is in stillness? That is what you want, not this. Read this for entertainment in the dream, if you must, but don't be sidetracked. The story is thoroughly saturated with language making use of the words I, me, and my. See how silly this story thing is, this pure fiction? There is no such entity. Me is a mythological idea. The story is told of events happening to someone. But there is no one here, no one to whom events can happen. The personal pronouns are used as necessary conventions of language, but they refer only to this mind-body organism which is empty of any personal self or entity to refer to. See how vacuous this whole thing is? So what? Who cares? This cannot be emphasized enough. The first parts of what happened in the jungle consisted of a series of experiences, and so can be thought about, remembered, talked about. In this case, there were what could perhaps be called deep, transformative, even dramatic experiences. But it must be remembered that this part of what happened in the jungle, the preparatory part, however deep and wonderful, was still only experience. Experience occurring in or through this mind-body thing. As such, it is essentially without any particular significance. Dream events in the dream life of a dream character have no lasting significance. Spiritual teachers sometimes remark that you can consider yourself fortunate if you have not had dramatic spiritual or mystical experiences. Perhaps I have not been as lucky. There have been experiences, some of which are related here. Such is the script for this dream character. But with them, the clear seeing that experience is neither understanding nor wisdom, but only the circumstances under which these may or may not occur. An experience of awakening is not awakening. And so the story about these experiential parts of what happened in the jungle has nothing directly to do with what came later, with what we call awakening or the understanding. The first parts, the experience parts, the parts that don't matter. Although, of course, like everything else, they play their part in the infinite unfolding, can be described more or less as they happened. The last part, an instantaneous event out of time, and out of experience can only be pointed to more obliquely. We had been in the jungle for several days, living in the Shuar village, going for treks in the forest, working mostly with the village elder and one of their vegetalistas, a medicine man, herbalist. The experience of traveling through Ecuador, coming into the rainforest itself, and living with and getting to know the people of this little village had all been pervaded by a sense of quiet well-being. Although, of course, it was all very different and strange in another sense. The jungle also seemed very familiar and welcoming, as if I was coming back to a home I'd forgotten. But after a few days, there came a time when this feeling of well-being abruptly wore off. Between midday and early evening of one day, my internal state went from open acceptance and trust to a growing unease, which escalated rapidly to serious fear and then to outright panic. I became convinced that I was going to die if I didn't get out of there immediately. In the context, there was some rational basis for the fear. There had been some incidents, a close encounter with a small but extremely poisonous jungle creature, a minor accident on one of the treks, misunderstandings with the shaman about the ingestion of certain plants. Clearly, slight missteps could have grave consequences. When I had informed family and friends about going on this journey, most had simply wished me well. But I had almost immediately received 2 phone calls with a different response. A family member and an acquaintance who did not know each other and who called completely independently of each other were each extremely concerned and tried to convince me not to go. The 2 women both have intuitional senses that I had appreciated and respected in the past. Now, one had had a dream, and the other simply a strong intuition that they could see me going on the trip but not returning. They felt that the trip posed extreme danger for me and tried to convince me to reconsider. I had taken their concerns to heart, but on balance had decided to make the trip. Now, remembering their warnings only fed the thought that I was not going to make it out of there alive. The mind took all of this and ran with it far beyond any rational basis, as the mind is so good at doing. What had been an adventure of exploration now seemed like the fecund jungle around me to have grown wildly out of control. I was in way over my head, and there appeared no way out. There was a quiet talk with the trip leader in which I was assured there was no possibility of leaving for at least several days, as the weather would not permit the Cessna to land at the grass strip upriver. Of course, the alternative was to withdraw from activities and try to keep myself in the bamboo hut that had been assigned to me. But something prevented my taking that option. In the midst of the fear that was growing in my gut, the certainty that I was going to die if things continued as they were, there was also a deep sense that what was being offered here was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for what at the time I thought of as wholeness. The awareness was imprecise, in fact quite confused, but nevertheless very strong that whatever spiritual force had brought me here to the jungle had done so with the purpose of offering an opportunity for deep transformation and healing of what I saw then as myself, body, soul, and spirit. To retreat to safety would be to miss that opportunity and leave the jungle as I had come, a conflicted, restless, anguished soul. That option reeked of failure and meaninglessness. What would be the point of safety if achieved at that cost? The conflict reached its most intense point in the early evening, I skipped the evening meal and was sitting in the communal thatched longhouse, staring out past the fire, smoldering in the center, and out the opening in the bamboo wall of the other side. The jungle began immediately outside, and the rain was falling through the leaves, its sound blending with that of the millions of insects as the rainforest slipped quickly into the evening darkness. The fear was intense, physically and mentally. The mind was running scenarios of various disgusting deaths in the jungle. The pulse was hard and rapid, and it was not only the increasing darkness that was causing my tunnel vision. I wanted to run, but the only place to run to was back to my hut and dismal defeat. So I sat and stared into the jungle. Presently the mind went quiet, the scenarios stopped running, and a new thought appeared. It was quite calm amid the panic, and it went like this. Well, if I am going to die, and I am going to die, if not here, then somewhere, if not now, then sometime, then if that's what is needed, if that's what it takes, then this is a good place to die, and this is a good time to die. A good place. I had felt very at home in the jungle, familiar, welcoming, nurturing. So obvious in its cycle of life and death and rebirth, a very appropriate place to leave a body, and a good time. There were fewer loose ends in my life than usual. Business deals and projects had been wrapped up and accounted for, and new ones not yet started. There was no relationship, and no unresolved personal issues or responsibilities. Prompted in part by the concern of my sister and friend, I had even made out a will and left it on my desk when I left home. If I am going to die, and of course I am, then to an amazing degree this actually is a very good time and place in this life for that to happen. Once this thought occurred, both the body and the mind went quite still, and there was a feeling as if someone very strong and gentle had walked up behind me and placed their hands on my shoulders. Good, I thought. This is very good. And I completely let go and relaxed into this new awareness that for this body to die, here and now, was a very good, appropriate thing, that this was why I was here. This was not resignation to something unwanted, but wholehearted acceptance and surrender and joy into what was known to be right and perfect. In mere moments, the entire thought and feeling and physical symptoms of extreme fear for my life dissolved and gave way to pure joyful acceptance, which even the certainty of death could not take away. But the most remarkable thing about this transformation was that it was clear to me that I had not done it or caused it or earned it. One moment the fear was there, intense and graphic. The next moment there was only its complete opposite. Peace and joy and clarity and appreciation of being so well cared for by the unknown force of spirit that even death would be arranged and carried out in an appropriate and perfect manner. Yet it was clear that I had not worked the fear through. I had not resolved anything. To suggest or argue that I had somehow faced my fear and by some psychological process broken through it to the other side would have, in context, been a fabrication. This new state of mind-body, surrender and acceptance, had simply landed in my lap without any accomplishment on my part. It seemed clear that left to my own devices, I could just as easily still be in that agonizing state of paralyzing fear and anguish. That I was not, but was instead sitting there in pure gratitude, and joy and acceptance was obviously a pure gift. It was astonishing. It would only be much later that I would realize that my sister, my friend, and that intuitive sense of panic all turned out to have been right. In fact, no me made it out of there alive. As it turned out, no individual named David would ever return from the jungle. Surrender. What can you take from here? You come into the world with your fists closed, and you go out of this world with your palms open. Kabir. A crucial element here is the idea, the concept of surrender, and the inexpressible truth that lies behind prior to this idea. Most other spiritual traditions, methods of self-improvement, or passive work treat this as a process, something you work at, working at letting go or at uncovering your stuff so that it can fall away or be purified. But of course, here as always the truth is radical, since awakening is the realization that there is no one here to awaken. Then the letting go, the surrender, is of one's entire individual existence. This is where I discover how much bhakti, the spiritual path of devotion, is running in my blood, when it is Rumi and his Sufi way of surrender to the beloved that resonates so truly, when it is realized that this is what I had been trying to do, in blind futility of course, all my life. The root of the name David is a Hebrew word which means the beloved. I should have known. I have always known. And yes, Nyana, the spiritual way of knowledge, is the other part of what is in the blood, that drive toward understanding and wisdom. But still it seems more natural to describe the understanding as an essential intuitive seeing and inward knowing. It is understanding, to be sure, but one which has little to do with comprehending anything. Teachers of pure non-duality frequently emphasize that there are no prerequisites, nothing that has to come before the understanding happens. Here's living proof of that. Yet at the same time, here also is this surrender. Essential, it seems, necessary. Back in the jungle, at that point where all this happened, when nothing happened, surrender also happened. Like the understanding later, it was total gift, unearned, undeserved, unsought. And I see now, for this mind-body at least, necessary, in order for the rest to happen. How can there be understanding that one is not without surrendering that one is? Finally, ultimately, the surrender and the understanding are the same, even if they are apparently, in perception or experience, separated chronologically. The very concept of the total understanding necessarily includes surrender, for it begins with the willingness, thy will be done, and ends in seeing that one is not. Thus, there is a sensed rightness in the idea that humility in some form is a mark of a true sage, an intuitive sense that if one doesn't have a sense of humor about themselves and about what is happening, it is highly unlikely that awakening has occurred. Taking oneself too seriously may be a fairly good sign that there has not been the giving up, the surrendering, of the false idea that one actually exists. Doubts about the authenticity of certain teachers often boil down to this, that while they may have an excellent understanding of the teachings, it is the complete surrender of the sense of individual self that has, perhaps, not occurred. In this phenomenality of duality, there is always the flip side, the complementary opposite that completes. Male-female, Shiva-Shakti, Nyana Bhakti, understanding, surrender. disdaining one or the other misses truth. Despite traditions to the contrary, there simply cannot be true jnana without true bhakti. There cannot be the ultimate understanding without the ultimate surrender. Certain personalities will try to avoid one or the other under the guise of some higher wisdom, but always at the cost of wholeness. There is a tradition that jnana is the higher path because the bhakta relies on a belief in someone or something to be devoted to, whereas the jnani knows there is neither. But true bhakti is pure devotion with no object, and the true jnani knows nothing. Jnana and bhakti, knowledge and devotion, understanding and surrender, in seeing and outpouring, mind and heart, cannot be divided or opposed, because they are the same. The essential basis of self-realization is the total rejection of the individual as an independent entity, whether it comes as a spontaneous understanding or through an utter surrender of one's individual existence. Ramesh. It can be seen that the path of the bhakta in devotion leading to surrender and that of the jnani and knowledge leading to understanding meet when each takes the final step. The ultimate surrender is the total understanding, and the complete understanding is the utter surrender unto death of the individual self. Jesus, only he who loses his life will find it. Again, not my will, but thine be done, because it is understood that there is no mine, no me to will. It is the surrender of all vestiges of the sense of the individual person, including, ironic as it may seem, all those hopes and dreams and prayers of ever becoming a good or better person, or a person other people might love or like or be drawn to. It is the complete surrender into this is all that is. And yes, that final surrender, that total understanding, is sudden and happens once, and that once is now, and that now is eternal. The Jungle, Part 2. Light will someday split you open. Even if your life is now a cage, love will surely burst you wide open into an unfettered, blooming new galaxy. Hafiz. Later that night in the dark, lying on a mat on the floor of the bamboo hut, the rain pours down on the rainforest, and the insects are all an interweaving of a million sounds and rhythms. Lying there, in the quiet peace of the surrender that had come a few hours before, not knowing or caring at what time or in what manner the inevitable death would come. There is a tearing, a searing physical pain in the chest that feels like my rib cage is being torn open. At the same time, there is a tingling at the top of my head, and the sensation that the top is peeled off my skull like a tight cap being removed. There is peace, consent, no fear. The sensation is that there is an immense surge or explosion or expansion, which the body cannot contain. Something surges, spins up out of the top of the head to I know not where, to infinity, while my heart expands up and out of my chest outward until it fills first the forest, then the world, then the galaxy. The surge out of the top of my head is noticed but not followed. What is followed with the attention is the expansion of the heart, because with the heart's expansion, the I sense also expands, and I find myself in what in my ignorance, without language or categories, I call presence, expressing as brilliance, like light, but clear and brighter beyond light. Not white or gold, just absolute brilliance. Brilliantly alive, radiantly being all that is. And there is an awareness, quite amusing, that presence has been aware of David forever, and is enjoying that David has woken up enough to perceive it. And there is a profound realization that nothing, absolutely nothing, matters. Anything I had ever thought or experienced or ever would think or experience was nothing, a dream. Absolutely did not matter. It was all quite really funny. I laughed and cried alternately for many hours, all night in the rain. In this part of that experience in the jungle, I knew 3 things about this presence, about all that is. 3 things, and later a 4th. The 3 words I used at the time were, first, that it is alive, not an inanimate cloud or energy field of some sort, nor even a thing which is alive. It is pure life, aliveness, existence. Second, that this presence is intelligence. It is alert, awake, and aware. It is knowing, not something that knows. Rather, it is the knowing. Third, that its nature, its essence, is pure, unfathomable, endless, unconditional love, compassion, beauty, outpouring. In this presence, I find myself in a state of overwhelming gratitude, bliss, unfathomable peace, love. Months later, I read about 3 Sanskrit words traditionally used together to try to express this brilliant presence, this all that is. Sat, Chit, Ananda. Sat, being, not being something, nor something being, but simply pure being in itself. Emness, I am who I am, what I called alive. Chit, consciousness, not consciousness of anything, just simple, pure consciousness itself. Awareness, what I called intelligence, knowing. Ananda, bliss, peace, outpouring. I lay in this presence for many hours. There was an intense experience of what I would call processing. I felt that I was taken back through my whole life, stopping at the places where there was unresolved issues or unfinished business, issues from childhood, from relationships, old pain, loss, grief, many of which I had dealt with extensively in many years of therapy. They were intensely relived, re-experienced, completed, and let go. When one was finished, another would arise. That night there was final resolution and closure on many old wounds that had never before been able to heal. The presence that was first experienced that night has ever since then never not been experienced. This life is lived in the light of presence always. It cannot now not be. The sense of presence is all-pervading. This awareness of Sat Chit Ananda, which is brilliance. The moment the heart seemed to expand out of the chest to fill the galaxy, presence, which is all that is, was first perceived as immense brilliance, light beyond light. My eyes were closed when this happened, and the brilliance was infinite. When I opened my eyes, the jungle was dark, black as only the deep rainforest can be, far from any lights and sheltered under the dense canopy of great trees from even the light of the moon and stars. With the eyes open, the brilliance receded to the background, still there, and still ultimately bright toward the back of the head, but allowing the eyes to see darkness in front of them. When my eyes closed, it was as if the brilliance filled my head, or more as if there were no head, no bamboo hut, no jungle, no earth, nothing to contain this brilliance which itself contains all and is all. For the first few days and weeks, this was distracting and a little disconcerting. Whenever the eyes closed, it was far brighter than when they are open, even in daylight. It took some adjustment to be able to sleep bathed in this brilliance. Darkness comes only when the eyes open, and even then the light is still there in the back. And the brilliance is not inert light. It is Satchitananda, living, breathing, aware, love, compassion, bliss outpouring. I have not talked with many people about the brilliance. If it had been all that happened that night, more may have been made of it. But in view of what happened a few hours later, it is simply what is, no more. It has been suggested to me by those who know about such things that it has to do with release of Kundalini energy. I don't know much about Kundalini, and beyond reading enough to confirm that it does seem to fit the description, it really isn't important. All of this, surges of energy, Satchitananda, the brilliance, the processing and healing of old wounds, was and is all experience. Wonderful, beautiful experience, but nevertheless experience and therefore dream stuff. Dream experiences of a dream character, part of the everything that is not. There is a deep gratitude for this experience, for the brilliance. It is a constant reminder and a deep comfort. It has made it impossible for the David body-mind to ever make the conceptual mistake of separating the world of mystical experience and Satchitananda from the world of body-mind and sense and objects. The brilliance is not in some other realm, accessible only under certain conditions. It is here, always, exploding in this head, affecting the visual functioning of this organism. It is a beautiful and astonishing gift, once again unsought, unearned, undeserved. But all this is still dream stuff and has nothing to do with the understanding. Words fail. Come out of the circle of time and into the circle of love. Rumi. What would you give to know, absolutely know, beyond any doubt, that everything really is all right, that there is no reason to fear, that there is no need to feel despair or loss or uncertainty, that all the pain and hurt and evil we have seen truly is an illusion, and that the most beautiful things we have experienced are only a glimpse, a small taste of what is truly real and truly ours. That everything is all right, that everything is perfect as it is, that all is well, this is what I see and what I know. No, none of that says it well at all. None of that is right. The words are slaves to the illusion. It is not truly ours, not something we possess, but rather what we are, yet not even that because there is no we. Of course, I know nothing whatever, and there is no me to see anything, nor is there anything to see. What is known, it is all but impossible to express or communicate. And ultimately it is not known or seen by I, it is what I is. Language and the concepts on which language is based fail, by definition, this truth, this beauty, is beyond. Beyond in the sense of being inaccessible by human thought and experience. Although, of course, it is obvious that there is no literal beyond, no other. In itself, it cannot be experienced. It can only be known. And even this knowing is not knowledge, not intellectual. This has nothing to do with mental comprehension. The mystics and poets, saints and awakened masters who have glimpsed or seen or known all agree that what is seen and known is ineffable, inexpressible. Putting it into words and concepts misses it completely. It is described as that which I, E-Y-E, has not seen, nor has ear heard, nor has the human heart conceived. And yet, the human heart cannot contain it, and so it spills over in fumbling attempts at expression of what is beyond expression, always qualified by the caveat that any such expression, any description, however awesome, cannot encompass it. At the end of human vision lies the final ultimate truth, inasmuch as such can be at all within our vision, even at its extreme limit. It cannot be experienced or thought of or spoken of, because it cannot be conceptualized. Our language and the thoughts and concepts which structure our language are essentially dualistic, based on the relationship of subject and object. There is no way to think or speak of anything without thereby making it the object of the supposed individual self, which thinks or speaks as the subject. Thus, as soon as there is linguistically structured thought, there is a deviation from the truth, a basic inversion of true subject-object relationship. No individual self exists as subject. Apparent individuals exist only as objects. And ultimate truth exists not as object at all. It is original, pure subjectivity. And to refer to it as an object, as one must necessarily do to think of it, to refer to it, as this sentence does, is extreme absurdity. Nevertheless, the knowing cannot be contained and overflows. That which lies at the end of human vision is spontaneously described by many who have seen by using three concepts, three words. They are only concepts, only words, and as such miss it completely. Nevertheless, being, consciousness, bliss, known in Sanskrit as Sat Chit Ananda. As Wei Wu Wei observed, we can see no further and no path leads beyond. And Nisargadatta Maharaj, you can take it that Sat Chit Ananda is the limit which your mind can describe of that state which cannot be described. This is the closest that mind and concepts can come to self. Whole mind, pure subjectivity, consciousness, all that is, presence, ultimate truth, I am. It is not an entity, a person, a thing, an it. It is pure being, absolute, fully aware, consciousness, overwhelming, outpouring, love, compassion, bliss. As it is beyond thought and concepts and language, it is also beyond experience. Experience is determined by the illusory concepts, the constructs of space and time. Every experience is determined by our sensory perceptions and has a beginning, a middle, and an end. This is true of physical, mental, and even of spiritual experiences. All experiences are structured by and contain within our conceptual framework of space and time. Self, presence, ultimate truth, is beyond, outside of the structure of space and time, and therefore cannot be experienced. However, it can be known, understood in a way that transcends both time and space, transcends experience. This is why awakening, or enlightenment, the occurrence of this knowing or understanding, is said by masters and teachers to be always instantaneous, not gradual or by degrees. Gradual or by degrees infers duration in time. To think of awakening as happening gradually is to still be thinking of this as happening to an individual who is experiencing in time. Awakening brings with it the awareness that there is no individual and no time. The understanding by its nature is outside of time, and occurs outside of time and thus always appears, from the vantage point of time-bound consciousness, as occurring instantaneously, that is, not taking any time. However, the basic functioning of human mind-body organisms is experiencing. That is the basic operational process, what the programming calls for, what naturally happens. Experiencing is what occurs in these mind-body organisms. Thus, when the understanding happens in a human mind-body, experiencing will occur. That mind-body will appear to have an experience. An experience will be constructed around that occurrence. Thus, there will be what can be called an awakening experience, or the experience of understanding or enlightenment. This awakening experience is not the awakening. The experience of understanding is not the understanding. It is merely a human experience created in the mind-body around the occurrence of the awakening, of the understanding. The understanding, the knowing of self, presence, ultimate truth, lies outside human experience as it lies outside time and space. The experience of the occurrence of this understanding, the awakening experience, is not the awakening, is not the truth. It is only an experience created in the mind-body similar to any other human experience. For this reason, the masters and teachers discount even great and wondrous spiritual experiences as being essentially worthless and something to be disregarded. Fixation on the experience will only draw the attention away from the true understanding. Nevertheless, the knowing cannot be contained and overflows. In the attempt to express the knowing, language and concepts are used even though they are only words and ideas, and miss it completely. In the attempt to express the seeing, aspects of the experience are described even though the experience of the seeing is only an experience, is not the seeing, is not the truth. As self, presence, what is described in concepts by using the ideas of Sat Chit Ananda, being, consciousness, bliss. So also it is often described in experiential terms by using the image of light. The experience of light, or something like light, often appears as part of the experience occurring around awakening or understanding. Hence it is called enlightenment. Self, presence, what is said to be like the sun shining in the blue sky, clear and bright, unmovable and immutable, illuminating all. Sung Kao. The blinding radiance of the great white light which has been called Satchitananda and which is also not at all. Wei Wu Wei. Pure it is, the light of lights. This is what the knowers of the self know. The sun shines not there, nor the moon and stars. Their lightning shines not. Where then could this fire be? This shining illumines all this world. Mundaka Upanishad. One day the sun admitted, I am just a shadow. I wish you to know the infinite incandescence. Hafiz. There was this light that became brighter and brighter and brighter, the light of 1,000 suns. This brilliant light, of which I was the center and also the circumference, expanded through the universe, and this light shone so bright, yet it was beautiful, it was bliss, it was ineffable, indescribable. Robert Adams. In this case, it is understood, seen, known as an all-encompassing presence, experienced as light beyond light, clear brilliance beyond any conceivable light or brilliance, which is everywhere, and fills and suffuses all because it simply is all that is. There is nothing that it is not. It is understood and experienced as presence because it is the ultimate aliveness of pure being and the ultimate awareness of pure consciousness, and it is here. It is what here is. It is what is here, what is present. And of its nature it is limitless and uncontained. This ultimate being and ultimate consciousness overflows constantly in the outpouring of its essence, its nature, which is pure, absolute love beyond our conception of love, complete compassion, total truth, ultimate beauty, outpouring. This is what is described as bliss, not some great orgasmic, physiological, or psychological pleasure, but all-encompassing, unconditional, unrestricted love, compassion, gratitude, outpouring. This overwhelming beauty, love, compassion, bliss is the very nature, the essence, of the brilliance that is Satchitananda, and its constant outpouring is this, all of this, what is known as the manifestation, the created universe, phenomena. This ultimate truth at the end of human vision is not something far away, not something beyond in the sense of being something other. On no account make a distinction between the absolute and the sentient world. Whatever consciousness is, so also are all phenomena. Huang Po. Consciousness, presence, all that is not static. It is the infinite field of pure potentiality, the possibility of everything, spilling over, pouring itself out in pure being, the beingness of everything, in pure love, the love which everything is. Words fail. One must use words and then extrapolate from them, attempt to use them to transcend themselves. Love is a word that stands for an idea, a concept, which in this context is inadequate to the extreme. In the culture by which these mind bodies are conditioned, love is held up as the highest value, but we seldom examine what we mean by it. Like most of our thoughts and values, it is surrounded, protected by fuzzy thinking to avoid the clarity which leads to self-examination, which can lead to awakening, to seeing, through the mist of this world which has been pulled over our eyes to blind us to the truth. In fact, our ideas of love are much more tainted than we care to admit with concepts and feelings of involvement, specialness, ownership, exclusion, need, caring, guilt. We think of caring as something important, something of the heart. But caring is only involvement, anxiety, attachment to outcome. It is a misperception that we need to care about this illusory existence, this dream, or that things need to matter. This only generates worry, anxiety, confusion, and feelings of separation and guilt. It does no good to the person we care for, only perpetuates their own involvement in the dream. This is not love. Our claim to love only limits ourselves and those we try to love. Love is not a basis for involvement. Love is neutrality. It is the true absence of judgments, censorship, desires, worry. It is our true nature, all that is, presence. It is a reminder that nothing matters. When there is awareness of being, always the presence of this perfect, uninvolved neutral love, there is the peace that passes all understanding. Meister Eckhart, the Christian mystic, said that you may call God love, you may call God goodness, but the best name for God is compassion. Even the concept of compassion can carry meanings of pity, caring, but the Buddhist tradition has used the word to mean uninvolved, unattached openness to the best for all sentient forms, without any thought of anything in return. When there is no experience of separation, love for another disappears along with hate for another. There can be only being in love, being inside love, the beloved. And when it is understood that all this unfolds as the perfect dream in consciousness, the outpouring of Satchitananda, there is no need for anything to be other than it is. Love then becomes something like the neutral holding of what is, in gratitude, in compassion, in presence. The overwhelming sense is that all this just is. What we see is the phenomenal manifestation in life as we know it, with all its ups and downs and pleasure and pain, and beauty and craziness, the perfect unfolding of the dream of consciousness, the constant outpouring of the brilliance which is Satchitananda, beauty, love, compassion, bliss. It all just is, in love. You are not that mind-body, just as I am not this mind-body. What is, what you are, is Satchitananda, consciousness, in whose dream appear these mind-bodies. When this is seen, there is awakening from identification as one of the mind-bodies in the dream. When there is not this identification, how can there be doubt, fear, despair, loss, uncertainty? The dream is unfolding perfectly, and the beauty and wonder of the dream are astonishing, dazzling, cannot be contained. What happens to this mind-body in the dream cannot be determined by this mind-body, by the character in the dream. What happens to this mind-body in the dream cannot in any way alter or affect the dreamer. What I am, presence, all that is. It all just is. All there is for life, the dream, to continue to happen while it continues to happen. And for there to be acceptance of what is an attitude of overwhelming, outpouring gratitude. To be in compassionate openness in the Satchitananda, to the being compassion outpouring bliss. to rave with Rumi and Hafiz and Eckhart, to be in love in the beloved. There is nothing else. The Jungle, Part 3. The great way has no gate. There are 1,000 paths to it. If you pass through the barrier, you walk the universe alone. Wu Men. The ancient teachings from India, the teachings of Advaita, or pure non-duality, of not-two-ness, make perfect sense. They make sense because at night, in the jungle, in a bamboo hut in a native village in the Amazon rainforest, hundreds of miles from any road, in the dark, in the torrential tropic downpour, amid teachings and teachers, very different but exactly the same, I wake up from a dream. I lie naked in the naked presence, and there is nothing else. There is not even me, lying naked. There appears to be this illusion, this dream, but it is only a wave that arises for a time on the surface of the ocean of one, a dream that flickers in awareness, and nothing is the same. Once aware of the dream, I cannot be unaware. Not a peak experience which comes and passes, and you forever search to regain it. An awakening, a seeing with different eyes from a different vantage, and there is no going back. At the same time, nothing has happened. There has been no awakening, because the sleep was only part of the dream. The funny part is I was never overtly a seeker. When I was younger, in my 20s, I spent many years in seminary studying philosophy and theology, working my way up through the ranks of ordination to Roman Catholic priesthood. But as soon as I was there, I turned my back on it, appalled by the misuse of power and control. For a time, I explored the other world religions, spending time in Zen and Taoism, but ironically avoiding what had always appeared as the far-out weirdness of the yogis and Maharajas and Sri this and Ram that of India, before finally chucking it all, professing agnosticism and hedonism and going to work building houses for 20 years. For a couple of years or so before the jungle, curiosity and a rediscovery of my own native roots had me poking around in indigenous cultures, learning from shamans. It was fun questioning assumptions about what is real, but I didn't know much about seeking or awakening or enlightenment beyond a hazy memory of having read D.T. Suzuki 20 years before. And even that was academic, comparative religion, nothing I had identified with or been attracted to personally. So there were no conscious expectations, no categories or concepts with which to frame or express what spontaneously happened when it happened. Nothing happened. Still later that night in the jungle toward morning, lying there in presence, there was a point when all the experiencing stopped. The thinking and the feeling and the processing that had been happening all completely ceased. I was not aware of it at the time, because there was no thought and no awareness of time or indeed of anything. Only in hindsight is there a looking back and realizing that there was a period of time, out of time, when there was no thought, no experience, no thing, nothing. It may have been hours. It may have been an instant. It was not of time. Only in retrospect can it be called a place or a time of stillness or emptiness. Because when it was occurring, there was no time and no place, and no sense or awareness of anything happening. I was not asleep. It was a condition of complete stillness and completely alert awareness. But there was nothing there to be aware of, no sense even of self to be self-aware. It could be called a completely empty stillness and awareness. I have no idea how long this lasted. Eventually, at some point in this place of no time, no thought, no place, no self, there gradually began to creep in an awareness that there was a simple watching of something. As this awareness distilled out of the emptiness, attention focused. And the realization was that what was being watched, what there was awareness of, was a guy lying in a bamboo hut in the jungle. This continued to focus until there was awareness, a kind of recognition of what had always been thought of as myself, David, lying there on a mat in the middle of the rainforest. And there was an abrupt realization. My God, there's nobody home. This was the moment at which nothing happened, like a pop of a bubble bursting, a shift in understanding. I am not David. There has never been a David. The idea of David is part of a thought, something like a dream that doesn't matter. The individual self, the one I thought resided in that body, looking out through those eyes, the one I thought a few hours ago had woken up enough to perceive presence, is not there, does not exist, never has. There is nobody home. This was not an out-of-body experience. I have had these in which me, myself, experienced being out of this body rather than inside it, and experienced looking at the body from outside instead of looking out through the body's eyes. This was not like that at all. What was being watched here was not only the body, but the whole David apparatus. Body, mind, self, soul, personality. What is watching is all that is. The watching, what I came to know as witnessing, is neither other than the body or mind or the whole David thing, nor not other. It does not originate from here, from the body-mind, but also it does not stand apart from it, because it is inclusive of it. The witnessing is clearly not being done by me, even a disembodied me. This witnessing is not being done by anyone, any entity. That's the point. There are no entities. There is nobody home. There is only the witnessing. Abruptly, instantly, effortlessly, out of stillness. A moment, an instant of radical, severe disorientation, discontinuity, then a stepping through that into perfect clarity, not at all unlike the experience of waking up. A dream seemingly real, lasting all one's apparent life. A stirring, and the sleep, dropping effortlessly away. A moment of disorientation as the dream is recognized as dream, and there is waking to the real. Immediately the dream falls away, and it is known that the dream was never real, that one never was what one had been dreaming. There is no before and after, no moment of when I was no longer David. This is the gateless gate, only the seeing that David never was. As near as can be said, the perception now is that there is no me, no David, and I is that which has never not been all that is. Always, everywhere, perfect, brilliant stillness, and no thing which has no name continually outpouring, seen now always not as from this body-mind thing. Gone beyond. Gate, gate, paragate, parasamgate, bodhi, svaha, gone, gone beyond, gone completed beyond, awakening, svaha. The Heart Sutra. Telling the story is problematic. In particular, like so much else in the teaching, it can fall prey to what I call the prescriptive-descriptive fallacy. The understanding, truth, which is apperceived cannot be expressed. The Tao that can be spoken is not the Tao. What is expressed is conceptual only, a translation into terms available in the dream. The reflection of the moon in a puddle of water, not the moon itself, and between the moon and its reflection, between truth and its translation into dream concepts and terms, lies a conceptual chasm, crossable only by the occurrence of the understanding itself. Many are interested in crossing the chasm. They are the spiritual seekers, and they are hungry, insatiably so, for any shred of evidence or guidance or advice or indication of what that chasm and its crossing and the other side are like. Essentially, the truth is that the other side is not like anything, and you can't get there from here. Rather, this already is the other side. All is here. There is no there. End of story. This is the true nature of things, always everywhere right before your eyes. But who can see it? Once seen, it is obvious that beyond is this, here. But say that to an ardent seeker, and you're likely to get a groan of frustration. There is a reoccurring archetypal image that appears often in dreams and myths, in fantasy and science fiction stories. A traveler arrives at a great wall. After much searching, he finds a door, a gate in the wall. When he opens the gate and steps through, he finds himself in a world, a universe, which is different from the one he came from, but somehow familiar. The same universe, but somehow very different. When he turns around to look back through the gate at the place he came from, he sees that not only is there no gate, there is no wall. Not only is there no going back, but he has not come from anywhere. Thus it is with awakening. There is no wall, no separation between here and there. In a sense, there has been a going beyond, yet that beyond is not other than here already. This is the gateless gate, and I has always been here. Where else? Nevertheless, seekers are a persistent lot, driven or drawn by a force they do not understand, and those who know or believe or at least suspect to have gone completely beyond are watched and examined and plied with questions and even imitated in the hope that some of what they seek might wear off. But despite long tradition, the understanding is not a contact high, nor is it known to be contagious. Whatever can be learned by observation or contact with a known sage or from direct answers to questions posed is descriptive only, an attempt, however apparently feeble or skillful, to translate the inexpressible into terms available in the dream. The story, the description of how the understanding occurred in a certain body-mind organism and descriptions of the ongoing experiencing in that body-mind organism are only that, descriptions, and cannot be taken as prescriptions of how another body-mind organism might get there from here. But of course, they usually are taken as prescriptive. That's how you get religion out of spiritual experience, how you get teaching about various practices, various paths, yogas, mantras, diets, advice on ways of thinking, ways of acting, the 4 applications, the 5 precepts, the 6 powers, the 7 virtues, the 8 impediments, the 9 stages, the 10 commandments. One in whom awakening has occurred is observed to have no attachment to the outcome of actions, so this is taught as a prescription. You must work hard to somehow no longer be attached to outcome. One in whom the understanding has happened is seen to sit quietly in deep stillness and silence for periods of time, and when asked what he is thinking, replies that there is no thought. So it is taught that you should try to sit quietly and have no thoughts. The teacher lives a celibate life, alone, so the students become renunciates. The teacher is married, so the disciples go out and get married. The teacher eats meat or does not eat meat, and the devotees follow suit. Nisargadatta Maharaj smoked cigarettes, and a startling number of his followers took up smoking. But what is happening in the awakened is happening spontaneously, without trying, either as a consequence of the natural programming and conditioning of that body-mind, in which case it has nothing whatever to do with awakening, or as a spontaneous outcome, a natural side effect of awakening in that particular body-mind organism. There is no one to try. This is what I mean by saying it comes naturally from the other side and cannot in any way be achieved by working at it from this side. This is another miserable metaphor, and of course there is no this side and other side. But you can see what is trying to be said. If awakening, the understanding, is to happen, it will happen. But I absolutely assure you it will not happen as a result of a dream character performing some practice. A practice may happen. Awakening may happen. But there is not a linear causal relationship between the two. Put in another way, when you are asleep and dreaming, what does a character in your dream do to cause that character to wake up? It is the dreamer, not the character, who wakes up. And waking up happens when it happens, for reasons well and thoroughly outside the control of any of the characters in the dream, including the character which in the dream you think is you. Gathering stories about awakening can serve as a huge impediment, keeping the seeker running in circles. I have had sincere seekers at Ramesh's morning talks in Bombay, when they heard some of my story, come and ask how to book a trip to the Amazon jungle and how to gain access to the tribe I was staying with. This is crazy. Forget it. It will not happen that way for you. 2 illustrations. One, a Zen saying, hence rather brief. Once a master has used a ladder to climb to the top of the wall. That ladder is thrown away forever and never used again. Find your own damn ladder. Better yet, know that it will find you, that it already has, that your feet are already on the rungs. The other, a rabbinical tale, hence somewhat more verbose. A woman came to the rabbi complaining that she could not conceive a child. and asking for the rabbi's advice and help? Ah, said the rabbi, that is difficult, but you know it was the same for my mother. For many years she could not conceive, and so she went to see the great rabbi, the Baal Shem Tov. He asked her only this: what are you willing to give and what are you willing to do? She thought about it. She was a poor woman and did not have many possessions. Finally, she went home and got her most valuable possession, the shawl she wore at her wedding, a family heirloom which had also been her mother's and her grandmother's. Then she returned with it to the rabbi. However, since she was poor, she had to walk, and by the time she returned, the itinerant rabbi had left for another town. For 6 weeks she walked from town to town, always arriving just after the Baal Shem Tov had left. Finally, she caught up with him. He accepted the gift and gave it to the local synagogue. My mother walked all the way home, the rabbi concluded, and a year later I was born. How wonderful, cried the woman, truly relieved. I have my wedding shawl at home. I will bring it to you. You can give it to the synagogue, and surely I will be given a child. Ah, said the rabbi, shaking his head sadly. Unfortunately, that will not work. The difference, you see, is that now you have heard this story, while my mother had no story to go by. Descriptive, not prescriptive. This is why the teaching has traditionally been called a finger pointing toward the moon. Take your dog outside some evening, say, "Hey, look," and point dramatically at the moon. Your dog will most likely stare expectantly at your finger. It shows great devotion and is quite endearing, but demonstrates a basic lack of understanding, of any ability to see beyond. Fixating on the story or elements of the teaching or practices, or a guru or teacher, or spiritual experiences, is staring at the finger, unable to realize that these are only pointers. None of these things have any importance in themselves. Look past these, beyond them, to what is being pointed toward. Once this is understood, descriptions and stories can perhaps be useful or at least interesting as pointers. There have always been texts, sutras, stories of the ancient masters, and how it was that the understanding occurred in the case of the Buddha, or Huineng, or Shankara, or Ramana Maharshi, and there is no reason that the telling of these stories should stop there. As Suzanne Siegel introduces her own account, Collision with the Infinite, the story that follows is my contribution to the modern version of the ancient texts. Yet ultimately, in Ramana Maharshi's summation, there is neither creation nor destruction, neither destiny nor free will, neither path nor achievement. This is the final truth. There really are no stories, as there is nothing happening here. The stories are only what the dream characters tell to themselves and to each other over and over, and in so doing keep the dream going. As my friend Koshin would say with great irony, it is something to do until Jesus comes. The storytelling is the dreaming, and the dreaming is desire, the desire to be. And more than that, the desire to be someone separate, someone special, someone with his or her own story. The dream character is completely caught in the spinning of a personal web, building and maintaining the personal story, driven by that unknown, unexamined wanting to assert and continually reconfirm the individual self. Awakening does not occur while pursuing a story, desire fueling desire, need fueling want, all of it constantly strengthening the sense of a separate self that does not exist. Awakening occurs when this desiring is irrevocably seen to be misguided, seen to be futile. Then the storytelling stops. Then the story stops. That is the going beyond. The Jungle Postscript. Don't pretend to be what you are not. Don't refuse to be what you are. Nisargadatta Maharaj. The eye through which I see God is the same eye through which God sees me. My eye and God's eye are one eye, one seeing, one knowing, one love. Meister Eckhart. Because I was not a seeker, did not have preconceptions about what to look for or what might happen. What did happen was almost as spontaneous, as innocent as waking up from sleep and getting up and going about your day. Everything was completely different, but it had always been. Everything had shifted, but it just was. Some time passed and some learning before intellectual understanding caught up with, filled in the implications of the shift in perception that had occurred. Along with Sat Chit Ananda, alive intelligence outpouring, being consciousness bliss, there was a fourth thing that I knew about presence, about the brilliance. I felt it, knew it at the time on a level beyond the mind, but my thoughts and categories wouldn't let me go there with conceptual understanding until somewhat later. In fact, looking back on it, it's rather odd that having realized that there is no David, that there is nobody home, that the obvious implication of this was not understood conceptually until some time later. But then, there wasn't exactly a lot of conceptual basis for preparation going into this. Presence was persistent. It was not an experience that came and went. Once here, it never left. I never left. Days later, I left the jungle, but presence continued, and I very soon came upon people and words and concepts that let me understand what my heart knew but my mind hadn't immediately had words for. That it is presence itself, looking out through David's eyes, through all eyes. It always has been. There is nothing else. Presence is the I that knows I am. Presence is not other, outside. Presence, Satchitananda, is my own heart, filling the galaxy, my own self. This has always been here, and it is what I am, while what I thought I was, my own self, is not. This I, this self, is all that is. It is the only isness that is. It is all that exists. The individual who thinks he is experiencing it, understanding it, does not. You can be told this forever and think, yeah, okay, I get that. But you don't. When this finally sinks in, hits home, explodes, nothing can any longer be the same. Nothing ever was. And yet, in another sense, there was no awakening, because there is no one to awaken. David has never existed, is a dream character, part of the cosmic joke. And who I really am is all that is, which has never been asleep, has no need to awaken from or to anything. I am that, is the other half, the completion of the seeing. There is no one home. Love says, I am everything. Wisdom says, I am nothing. Between these two, my life flows. Nisargadatta Maharaj. The understanding here will be forever colored by the fact that the awareness that I am not came first, and as such is the basis. the essential pivotal breakthrough insight into awareness of what is. Thus, the understanding that universal infinite presence, awareness, brilliance is what I is always in the context of that complete emptiness, the knowing that the separate self simply is not. Who is infinite presence? Not me. No, who at all? Only the I, which is all that is. There are cases where the realization I am, or perhaps a glimpse of it, comes first, without the surrender and the profound seeing that as any kind of individual to be anything, I am not. The result then may be something quite different. So then various sporadic practices, praying, shamanic journeying, some meditation, they were part of the conditioned routine of this dream character, and for a time they continued to be done, but I see they're a part of the dream. Pray to whom? Journey to where? There is no other, no two. These become gateways to where I already am. Sat Chit Ananda, I am that. There is no place to go, nothing to do, all is awareness. Around and through as us, this life is lived. In and around and through this mind-body thing, but not by me. Spiritual practices and efforts once motivated by a sense of separation or a need to connect, a need for meaning or purpose, fall away and cease naturally, with no intent or effort to stop them or continue them. They simply do not arise. What happens? Happens spontaneously. Sometimes, quite often, there is sitting quietly in stillness in the brilliance and profound peace. But this can hardly be called praying or meditating. It is no thing. It is emptiness. It is being. It is consciousness. It is bliss. Life is, quite suddenly, marvelously, utterly simple. Ego, the sense of an individual self and all its misperceptions, is seen as itself a mistaken perception, as having never existed. The dream character goes on being the dream character, brushes its teeth, trims its beard, still likes the same foods, still has poor social skills, and finds many things that are said and done confusing or disorienting, as it always did. But the character has been gutted, hollowed. It used to take itself seriously, think it was someone. Now, when it looks within, it knows there is nobody home. The character is a sham. Only the deep sense I am remains. And this is known not to belong to the character, but to presence, which is always, everywhere, perfect brilliance. Like the electric fan which keeps spinning after the plug is pulled, like the bicycle that rolls on for a while after the rider has jumped off, 46 years of conditioning had worn a path that this mind-body thing, creature of habit, could follow in its sleep, which, of course, is exactly what it had been doing, following the script of the dream. Now it winds down. Took a lifetime of dreaming to write its story, to accumulate, accrete, build up these thoughts and feelings and memories and experiences into this personality. Now, with no intent or effort to either stop or continue, it may take a lifetime to fall away, or a moment, or not, while there is watching, witnessing. It doesn't matter. It just does not make the slightest difference.